Nekera and the Osto Libra by Kelly M. Scott.
Tales well told are a reckoning between ideas and poetry. Too much of one or the other harms the telling, or so my father used to say. He was a man of mixed blessings, congenial and stern in equal measure. He was a capable worker, a good parent, and a loyal citizen of Osto. It was in that city I first began to learn the forbidden knowledge, much to the chagrin of the sisters upon high. Although an eon has passed since my fondest such remembering, I still think of the time I spent hunting in yellow fields and red forests, under the amber sky. Oh, happy days with Puck by my side. Upon occasion, there were happy nights, too, among the tomes and great works of art in the revered Osto Libra. I form now a rare smile as I make these writings on my youth. I attest, though, not for such fond feelings, but rather I write these words as way of examination, lest history judge me unkindly. This text is my recording of the crests and troughs upon the roiling sea of life which has brought me here. I beg you to reserve your judgment of me, but that you read my accounting and allow it to be added to the Osto Libra and the many other such Libras throughout the lands. Regard this a historical record for every citizen's contemplation, whether you now curse or praise my name. Puck was not the only friend of yesteryear that warms my heart for me to think of now. I oft think of my long-lost love, Libra, my father, Huff, and my sister, Nekera, who I owe my life to. I also think in fondness of my brother, Mott, and of my childhood friends, Dingri and Locke. Then there is the one who first took me on my grand path to ascension, the ancient seer I knew only as Archimatron. Truth be told, not all my memories are so clear to me as before. Many details, lost to time, and now mostly only flashes remain. Those treasured glimpses that come to me when I least expect, but are always welcomed. I yearn for the comfort of the safe and small world of my youth, and I remain with heavy heart that I can never return there. As the seers tell us, ignorance truly is bliss. And so, dear reader, I start my story on the occasion of my 12th turning day, and in my favourite childhood roaming grounds, the edge of the Ambridge forest. It was late in the day, Puck was with me, and my bow was in my hand. My treasured hunting bow was the only weapon I was allowed, other than the skinning knife I kept tucked into my belt. On my shoulder, I carried several rabbit pelts, all freshly pared with most of the rabbit meat, wrapped in linens and tucked into my knapsack. The rest of the meat Puck had eaten, his reward for all the sniffing out and fetching he'd done that day. He may not have been the largest caracol in Osto, but he was fast and had a fine nose, enough to sniff out rabbits and help me hunt them down. "Shall we head back, then?" I asked him, as he licked his front paw and began grooming the indigo fur on his head. Puck, home now. He let out an agreeable mewl in answer, leapt to all fours and led the way back to the city. We were almost at the city gates as the tallest, toughest girl I knew appeared from them. She was walking with an invigilate, who carried a huge two-handed sword on her back and wore polished golden armour which gleamed in the rays of the falling sun. "Cobb, you lanky little stripling," she shouted at me. "Tidings, Dingri, are you—" I was unable to finish my question as the tall girl ran forward and hugged me, my feet almost lifting from the ground as she pulled me in. Puck rubbed his cheek against her leg. "Yeah, it's amazing, right? We're heading to the sifting sands for my trials, but don't worry, I'll pass easily. No problem." She released her firm grip on me and waltzed away to stand by the invigilate again, a confident smile upon her face. The invigilate looked at her, and then at me, with an expression I could only read as disdain. "Come!" she barked at Dingrey, and then strode away. Dingrey dutifully followed her, but turned her head and winked at me as she went by. I raised my hand and wished her well as they disappeared between the trees that lined the way down to the sands. Puck pawed at my boots, eager for us to return to our dwelling. It was becoming increasingly dark, and I didn't want to risk a day in the stocks for breaking curfew. We hurried home at a quickened pace. One of the sentinels we passed shouted at us to get off the streets. I bowed and apologized before we ran the rest of the way home. In haste, we barreled through the entrance of our abode. The walls shook slightly as I slammed the door shut behind us. Across the room, a stove emanated a warm glow that illuminated the area. Its oven fire dimmed only by the dark shape of my father who stood before it. He whirled around on hearing the commotion of our entrance, looking pleasantly surprised, and not with the angry face I had expected. A leather apron was tied around his plentiful waist, and he was holding a wooden cooking spoon. "Sorry, Father. I didn't mean to shut the door so hard. A soldier told us to hurry home, and we had to run almost the whole way." "Oh, don't worry about that, my boy. It's your turning day. It's only right that you're in elevated spirits. Here, sit down at the table. Your sister will be here soon." He smiled at me and began whistling a jolly tune as he turned back to the stove. I put my bow down by the door and hung the rabbit pelts from a rope on the wall. Before sitting at the table, I took out the rabbit meat from my knapsack and placed it into the cold box. As I sat, Puck jumped onto me and circled twice before settling into my lap. Father set the table. He laid out 3 bowls, some spoons and knives, and then placed a huge chunk of warm bread on a flat board in the center. "The food smells delicious, what is it?" I asked. "It's caracol stew," he replied, grinning at me. Puck drew upright with his ears in the air. No, just joking with you, sorry, Puck," Father told him. My pet turned his head and looked up at me, unimpressed, before settling into my lap again. "I don't think he liked your joke," I told my father while petting Puck's head. "Oh dear, never mind. Well, it's actually calling bird stew." "Calling bird?" I exclaimed. "Yes, I traded one of my flints to Sol the brewer for it. Said his son had caught a few of them down by the old pond yesterday, and it was my luck that he'd lost his last flint, so I got us a calling bird." He brought over the iron pot that had been sizzling on the stove and ladled out a large portion of the stew into each of the bowls. Just as he was pouring the last bowl, there was a sharp rap on the door. My sister had arrived. "Nekera, you've timed it perfectly," my father said with a fond tone. "We are busy with the increasing number of initiates for sure, but I wouldn't miss this for all the denarii in the Osto coffers. Happy turning day, Cobb." She patted the hair on my head, the same way I was petting Puck's head. She was wearing the distinctive silver armor of a sentinel, as well as a long, velvet robe of brilliant red with a deep cowl attached to the top of it. She removed her robe and held it up to me. "When we are done feasting, for your turning day treat, you can spend some time in the Libra with me. If you put this on and keep your mouth shut, of course." I dropped the piece of bread I was cutting. I loved the Libra. So many books to read, so much art to look at. It was the most marvelous place in all of Osto. "Great thanks to you, sister." She smiled, and after placing the robe on the back of my chair, she joined us at the table. "So how did you spend your day?" Nekera asked me, as father offered her some cut bread. "Out hunting by Ambridge Forest. Puck helped. We caught 5 rabbits." "5? Maybe I should take Puck with me when next I hunt." Puck flicked his tail around on hearing this and began to softly purr. "I trust you returned home before sunfall? There's been sightings of prowlers recently," she asked. "Yes, we were back at the city before it got dark." "Oh, and guess who was leaving just as we arrived?" I gave her no time to answer. "Dingri, that really tall girl from the Kilns Quarter." "The one that's sweet on you?" Nekera smiled mischievously. "What? All she does is pick me up or try to push me over." "That's just her way of flirting. Surely a man of 12 turnings knows that." My eyes went wide, and Puck shifted uncomfortably around on my knees. "Pfft, sister. Why must you tease me? Don't be so sensitive, Cobb. Besides which, don't you want to be a father soon? You two would have some fine younglings. Her size and strength, your skill watching Puck chase rabbits." Father laughed loudly at that, but I just rolled my eyes. Nekera jabbed me a little with her elbow while joining in the laughter with him. A moment after they had stopped, and with tears still in their eyes, Nekera sat up straight and announced how much she missed our family dinners, especially with Mott. "I still can't believe he is no longer with us," she said, but the tears in her and Father's eyes now seemed of a different nature. Father stood up and grabbed a bottle of fermented berries and several glasses from one of the shelves. He poured out 3 glasses of the ruby liquid and held one of them aloft. "To my boys, Cobb, who has today become a man, and to Mott, who watches over us, always." "To Cobb and to Mott," said my sister, raising her glass too. I raised mine along with them. "To dear Mott," I said. And we, all 3, drank as one. The stew was soon eaten, followed by some sweet pastries that Father had bought from Wick's bakery, especially for my turning day. Afterwards, once the table was cleared, hugs were exchanged, and we bid farewell to him. Nekera had helped me put on the robe and pulled the cowl up and over my head. I could hear Puck scratching at the door after we left, desperate to join us. His presence, of course, would have been an impediment at our destination, so I sadly had to leave him at home. "Now remember to walk with a straight back and don't talk to anyone," Nekera told me, as if this was the first time we'd ever done this. "I know what to do," I told her, a little annoyed, but she just shushed me. The top of the cowl hung so low that it made walking difficult due to not being able to see anything except for the ground ahead of me. I followed my sister's feet, as I normally did, down streets and over the grating bridge until she stopped abruptly, and I did the same a couple of steps behind her. "Well met, attendants," she spoke to the 2 guards posted at the entrance of the Libra. "Well met, Sentinel," one of them replied. "Another initiate causing problems, Commander?" the other guard asked. "When isn't one of them causing problems?" Nekera replied. They laughed politely, but I think maybe insincerely. "Bit short for an initiate, isn't she?" one of the guards asked. "I'm sure she'll grow a lot after the changing," said the other. "The sisters welcome any who are capable, regardless of their stature." Nekera told them, "Now open the doors and make way." "Aye, Commander." I heard the movement of their feet, and then the familiar low groan of the Libra's heavy doors being pushed open. "Come, initiate." My sister ordered me, and while making sure to keep my head down, I followed her into the building. Once we had passed through the antechamber and into the main hall, my sister stopped and whispered to me, "Keep the cowl over your head. There are scholars here." It was only when we had reached the gallery on the farthest side of the building and my sister had locked the doors behind us that she told me it was safe to show my face. I pulled back the cowl and then removed the robe entirely, allowing it fall to the floor. I was grateful to be able to see my surroundings clearly again. And what surroundings they were. Even in the dim light of the evening lanterns, the paintings displayed there were a feast for the eyes, a salve for the soul, an inspiration for the mind. For in those hundreds of paintings were depicted visions of the ancient world. Many showed strange green landscapes and cyan skies. Others depicted the many bizarre beasts of yesteryear. One such beast featured in my favorite painting. It was a proud-looking thing, a golden, muscular demon laying in front of ivory pillars. In some ways, the animal reminded me of Pook, but in other ways, more like the prowler I once saw, many turnings ago. The prowler that took my brother's life with a savagery that haunts me still. That prowler was the reason why my sister had first brought me to the Libra, and why she broke her sacred oath to train me. That was over 4 turnings ago, when I had barely even held a knife, let alone a sword or spear. She would bring me to the Libra at night, and sometimes we would go deep into Ambridge Forest. At first she took it easy on me. Her method of training was to show me how to hold the weapons correctly and the most effective movements to use for each type. I was only allowed to use carved wooden versions of each weapon. She would use the imitation weapons too, when, eventually, we sparred. For 4 whole turnings, she winded me, sent me reeling, or flipped me onto my back. My sister was always careful never to hurt my hands or face, but every other inch of my body was turned black or purple at one time or another. No one outside of my family ever knew. Nekera constantly reminded me to always keep myself covered, lest the bruises raise suspicion. I feel it's important to state that all of these apparent beatings were not done out of malice, but rather out of love. My sister was a sentinel of unique skill and ambition. She took to the effects of the changing incredibly well, and consequently rose in the ranks of the Osto militia rapidly. She was also fortunate to have squired for the High Commander, Galandre de Guillaume, as an initiate. Galandre was possibly the greatest commander that Osto had ever known. Nekera had been a quick study, and Galandre had taken a liking to her. Thus my sister was granted training from the best warriors in Galandre's army. After the Outcaster incursions began, my sister had been given her first commission, and she led but 36 soldiers against a settlement to the north of the city. They were victorious, but only Nekera and 5 others returned alive. Galandre was given to grief at the news of so few of her warriors to return, but then she became ecstatic when she learned that my sister numbered among them. I was told that the sentinels held a great feast that lasted for almost 3 sunfalls in celebration. It was known that henceforth Galandre and my sister were bedmates, and Nekera was promoted to commander of the city guards. And for a time they lived contentedly, until the call to war came from the sisters upon high. Galandre dutifully took her forces to fight in the southern campaign, but was never heard from again. As commander of the city guard, my sister had not joined the campaign, although she oft wept and told me Galandre had refused to take her, and that they would still be as one otherwise. Heads up! I barely had a moment to put out my hand to catch the wooden sword that Nekera had flung toward me as she called out. Fortunately, my instinctive reach and grasp were true, and I settled into the fighting posture that I had been taught was best while holding a sword with both hands. Good catch, brother. Let's see if your reactions are as quick with true force behind a weapon, she said to me as she held up her own wooden weapon, a long-shafted spear, and sprinted toward me. Now it's important to mention here, for those of you who may never have seen a sentinel in battle, let alone been attacked by one themselves, my sister was fast. Very fast. She was quicker than my brain could readily accept, And that was true every single time I saw her in action. Knowing it and experiencing it in the moment were worlds apart. In the time it took me to take a breath in, she was upon me with her spear thrusting at my torso. I did as she had taught, and without even thinking, I rotated away, and at the same time I pushed the sword to my right with as much strength as I could muster. It clattered against the edge of her spear, and she vaulted over me, while spinning in mid-air, so that we faced each other once again. I was afraid to try to press the advantage, because I knew my sister's strength, and it was oft folly to attempt to strike her, while she had barely broken a sweat. Nekera used my hesitation to switch the grip on her weapon's shaft, and with the blunt end she swung it around toward my head. I ducked, but only to see her foot rising to my chest. She kicked me hard and knocked me away and onto my back. It hurt as I made contact with the polished stone floor of the gallery, but I knew to disregard the pain and keep focus upon my opponent. It was good that I had learned this, as she soon followed up her kick with an attempt to strike a vertical blow. I held my sword at such an angle that her spear slid away to my left. For a pause, my sister was slightly off balance, having thrust the spear with such force. I performed a well-practiced roll to my right, keeping a tight grip on my weapon. After a second roll and rising to my feet, I took the sword in both hands again. Nekera stepped back, smiled at me, and began to spin her spear around, using both hands at such a speed that the breeze it created pushed back my hair and made me squint. "Well met, brother. You're getting much faster these days." "I practice all the time while hunting," I explained, catching my breath once again. "Good cob, but be wary not to do so where others may see you." "No, I know. It's just Puck and I, when we are deep in the forest." She giggled a little. "Oh, well, perhaps Puck has been teaching you better than I." I screwed up my face at her. "Perhaps," I exclaimed, and launched myself forward. She stopped spinning her spear in time to meet the edge of my sword. The wooden weapons made clunking and thudding noises as we struck and parried several more times. My pride would like to tell you that I, on my 12th turning day, finally bested my sister. But alas, I cannot say such a thing. Despite my best efforts to match her blows with parries and feints, at some point I fear she grew bored and desired a hastened end to our sparring. In time she unleashed a series of well-practiced strikes with such speed, poise, and grace that I couldn't help admire her even as she disarmed me, struck me in the shoulder, and finally swept my legs to leave me prone once more. I was very tired and admitted defeat as I struggled to stand again. I was being helped to my feet when there was a gentle knock on the gallery door. Nekera paused and looked at me. "One of the scholars. Grab the training weapons and hide somewhere. Quickly. I'll deal with them." I did as she told me, and hid behind a stack of large canvases near the back of the gallery. I tried to quiet my breath and the pounding of my heart, so I could hear my sister's conversation with the intruder. After she unlocked and opened the door, I heard a frail and monotone voice address her. "Oh, Commander, my apologies. I didn't realize you were in here." "Aye, sir," Nekera retorted with a tone of vague recognition. "I was retrieving one of the texts at the back of the Libra, you see. A chronicle on the works of Patrician Isenius. You know, he was one of the master architects in Osto. He built the grand repository." My sister cut him off. "Seer. Of course, I do tend to meander. I'm very fond of the city architecture and—" "Seer!" She cut him off again. "Pardon, Sentinel. It's just that, as I was searching for the text, I heard some curious noises emanating from the gallery. Quite a fracas, in fact, and with the door being locked from the inside, I had cause to worry. My apologies. I did not mean to cause you concern. Sometimes I train here at night. Oh, I see, said the seer, sounding like he did not see at all. Is that why your robe is on the floor? He asked. If that's all, seer, I bid you a goodly eve. Nekera sounded polite, but stern. Very well, Commander. A goodly eve to you, too. He reluctantly acquiesced, and I could hear his clanking footfalls fade down the passageway, back to the main hall. At the time, I recall being alarmed at the strange voice and metallic footsteps of the scholarly intruder, but it would be only 2 more sunfalls before I came to meet the seer himself, the one whose name is Archimetron. After I was certain he was gone, and Nekera had once again locked the gallery door, I emerged from behind the canvases. I asked her about the seer, but she dismissed him as an old eccentric best left to his dusty tomes. She trained me in different stances and strikes for the rest of the evening, until the weapons were near broken and sweat ran down my back. When the last scholar had left, she allowed me to look through some of the tomes in the main hall. She even let me take a tome that had gleaned my interest, with my promise to return it to the Libra when next we were to train. It was a travel journal called My Wandering by Michaelmas. It contained many puzzling anecdotes and some rudimentary maps. It was yellowing and smelled of old wood, but I felt compelled to study it. When it came time to leave, I wore the red robe again for the journey home. Nekera told me that she had business to attend to at the tower, but she would return for the garment on the morrow. I bid her a fond farewell before hurrying off into the dark embrace of the city. Alas, after that evening, I never saw my sister again.